Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into Tougen Anki Volume 2, covering chapters 7 through 10. This is part 1 of a two-part breakdown. Volume 1 is covered in a video on my channel titled Manga That Inspired This Summer's Hottest New Anime. This video will break down key story events or activities, world building, some character development that's occurred since Volume 1, and power mechanics or the power scale piece in this particular story. Let's get into it. So just a quick high-level overview of Volume 2 before we jump into the detailed chapters. Volume 2 opens up at Resetsu Academy, where Shiki, Ichinose, and his classmates face their first real survival trial, the game of tag in the Academy woods. The students must retrieve scattered balls and avoid capture by their instructor. But the stakes are high. Fail and they will be expelled. Remember, Shiki is still reeling and going through trying to deal with the murder of his adoptive father. And the murder of his father occurred at the hands of a Momotaru agent named Sammy DeRay. So Shiki real fight for survival begins now because he needs to be able to stay at Resetsu Academy, which trains Onis. And of course, Shiki found out he was an Oni in Volume 1 when his blood art released. So it is important that Shiki be able to understand how to use his ability, how to activate it at will, and how it is a part of him in terms of his emotion, and the things that he favored. But we will get in those pieces later as it relates to the Blood Eclipse release scaling in this particular story. Chapter 7 opens up where Shiki, Jin, and Homare are now in their three-man team. And of course, Homare is the female in the group's girl. But tension rises fast. Shiki, still learning to control his only blood, clashes with Jin. Homare, overwhelmed by self-doubt, tries to intervene only to unleash her own uncontrollable blood clips release. Her blood ability takes the terrifying form of a giant woman with massive teeth, a force so powerful even Jin is forced on the defense. Homare begs her teammates to run, terrified of what her own power might do. But of course, Shiki and Jin both tries to subdue her blood eclipse release, but it's totally impossible, and it appears that even she doesn't have any control over it as well. What do we know about this team in terms of their blood eclipse release? Of the three, Jin tends to have more control over his blood eclipse release ability than Shiki does and Homura. What we're witnessing here is how their only blood ability is linked to trauma, interest, and experience, and how it can go out of control. Jin's blood eclipse release demonstrates his dual saw ability, where he can use his blood to create saws, round saws, chainsaws. He shows a higher level of skill, creating two distinct blood shapes at once. This is noted as an advanced ability. Moving on to chapter 8, which is titled Can't Just Leave You Behind. So Homare's blood eclipse continues to attack wildly in the woods, endangering both Shiki and Jin. But they both decided that they're going to stay. Well, Shiki definitely decided that he was not going to leave her. He was going to stay there to help her out. Of course, Jin is trying to pull out all the attacks he has in his arsenal to try to subdue her. But he's looking at the size of her blood eclipse, and he's thinking, as an Oni, the amount of blood that they have in their own bodies differs from that of an average human. But the size of her eclipse just doesn't make any sense to him. Like, he's thinking there's no way her body can hold that much blood. So in this chapter, we also get a brief conversation between the principal and the professor. So the professor, who is Naito, was watching this as well from a distance. He wants to see how Shiki and Jin is going to handle dealing with Homare's out of control blood eclipse. And the conversation between the principal and the professor, I think, is essential in terms of the professor is expressing to Naito that only children face like brutality. They face being hunted, exploited, and killed by Momotaru agents. So the test that's happening right now in the woods, and it's actually 3 groups, but chapters 7 and 8 has only focused on Jan, Shiki, and Homare, which kind of flows over from volume 1, like where volume 1 ended. But he's thinking that these lessons are just not about a test of skill, but they're a test of survival for the Oni children and teenagers who will end up having to fight if they can live past being hunted by the Momotaru agents. So that's why this Resetsu Academy is so important, to have Oni children come through there and get trained, because they're going to have to fight to protect their own lives, but also fight as part of the Oni agency as well. So back in the woods, Shiki has just decided, look, I'm going to risk my own life to save her. While, of course, Jin coldly weighs his option. So in this particular chapter, we also continue to get a good look at different personalities. Shiki's personality versus Jin. So the message is kind of clear here, or it's starting to come through, that strength without empathy means nothing at all. At the end of chapter 8, we watch Shiki struggle with trying to figure out how to activate his Oni ability. He's thinking, come on, I need to use my brain, figure out a way out of this. If he can only control his own blood. So that brings us to chapter 9, which is titled, Now It's My Turn. So through Shiki's struggle to activate his blood eclipse release and being consumed by frustration at his own weakness, Jin has to continue to step up with his expert control, using or wielding his dual saw-shaped blood weapons. Watching Jin, Shiki has a breakthrough, and he realizes that his power must come from what he values. So he focuses on the image of a gun, something familiar, protective, and at last, his blood eclipse release takes form, a massive gun-shaped arm. Shiki finds not just his power, but his purpose. And so back in volume 1, we saw Shiki unknowingly activating his Oni blood eclipse for the first time, and it came through in the form of guns. So this time he realizes that it's attached to more of the things that he values, but it's attached to more than that. It's attached to emotion as well. So Shiki springs into action in chapter 9, and he goes in for an attack on Homare. So him and Jin are both kind of tag teaming attacks to subdue Homare. So this continues for a while, and then of course Jin pulls out another one of his moves, and the professor is still watching this, and he's thinking like, producing 2 unique forms of blood at the same time, and he's complimenting Jin's, of course, blood eclipse release, because he can activate 2 forms at the same time. It's a very, very high level technique. And he's thinking that the skill and experiences that Jin has will stand out among the others. But Shiki, being on this team and around Jin, he's figuring out and learning how to activate his own as well. So this survival test in the woods does have a good benefit for Shiki. And with all of that said, Shiki finally again releases his eclipse blood, or blood eclipse, and it's coming from his right arm. It's a massive gun. So we're going to get ready to see him as we go into chapter 10 be able to help Homare out by being able to subdue her. So chapter 10 is titled Not My Problem. SHIKI'S newfound ability helps him dismantle Homare's blood form, saving Jin in the process. But the cost is great. SHIKI collapses from blood loss, showing the steep price of using such a power. Professor Naito arrives, recognizing SHIKI'S growth but warning of the danger of overuse. Jin, unmoved, tries to attack the professor because once again, they were in the middle of a survival game. So Jin did not forget that. But also, this doesn't quite sit well with the professor. So once again, Jin proves once again that raw strength without heart leads nowhere. So he's attacking, not realizing and forgetting that his teammate just went through a ordeal of her releasing her ability and using up so much blood. But Jin is only thinking about the win and about the nature of the original game, and just totally goes off and attacks the professor. Even the professor shows disdain for Jin's selfishness, and this does not sit well with him at all. As part of chapter 10, the professor provides more detail on the blood eclipse, and it's through him watching the battle with SHIKI'S team, and he talks about the blood eclipse release. He says, Oni in human blood possesses fundamentally different properties. The shape and strength of the Oni blood can be freely manipulated. Any object pictured in one's mind is sent out and travels through not just the nervous system, but the circulatory system as well. The mental image of the object suffuses the blood. When the blood flows out of a wound, it is given form. Trauma, interests, and experience all play a role in shaping the outcome. So this is a pretty good understanding of what the blood eclipse release power scale is for the Oni side, or the blood mechanics part is. So this gives us a little bit more detail on how the Oni blood's ability works. These chapters, which are chapters 7 through 10 in part 1 of this video, highlights the themes that make Tougen Anki stand out: the cost of power, the weight of trauma, and the meaning of accountability. SHIKI begins to find his way not just as a fighter, but as someone who fights for others. In part 2, we'll cover chapters 11 through 15, where these lessons are tested even further. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching.